Okay, so last week I really missed out. I mean, that was an opportunity that I didn't really understand. The opportunity to just talk about myself, a subject that I'm quite fond of. In all seriousness, though, it really was a missed opportunity to tell my story. The class's text recommends giving speeches on topics that we're familiar with. In truth, what do we know more intimately than ourselves? I'll first give you a little bit of background about myself and my family, where I grew up. I'll tell you a bit about my school days and my post high school experiences, and then I'll touch on some interesting parts of my military career and summarize the story for you. So, as I said, I'm first going to tell you a little bit about myself and where I grew up and my family. I was born in Tacoma, Washington, to my parents, Paul and Ann Brown. My dad, Paul, was a former Army drill sergeant and a ranger, and I definitely think I got a lot of my service before self kind of mentality from him, and as well as my work ethic. My mother was a former Carney. She grew up in the area and went to high school there. I was born in 1979, and my little brother was born in 1981. My first memory is actually of going to the hospital to meet my little brother for the first time and picking out a little stuffed animal for him. I attended school there until about 1993 when I was in middle school, and that's basically my upbringing there. Only I really forgot to mention one interesting detail, and that is that my parents, as a little side business, imported, grew, and sold illegal drugs. I was 13, and it was about that time that I was starting to kind of catch on that something wasn't quite right. And so it was about that time my parents decided that it was time to stop peddling illegal drugs. It was time for a fresh start, so we moved. We found a nice little community in the capital city of Olympia. It was a great experience for me. I was adjusting to a new town as a teenager, though, and it wasn't too simple, but I don't think I had a horrible time of it either. I started at a high school there that was brand new. I was the first class to go through. I was getting involved in music, which I absolutely loved. Another activity that I really got into outside of music and sports was I joined an Air Force ROTC unit, and again, that military upbringing from my dad, and as well as just a general kind of drifting towards that military direction started there. I also started attending college as a high school senior, and that was kind of an interesting experience. Being the only high school kid in a college class was a little awkward. Then I graduated from high school and started at the local junior college, which was way too expensive. I dropped out after a quarter. So now that I've told you a little bit about where I grew up and kind of my school days, at that point I knew that I really couldn't afford college. The job that I had paid well, but I really still felt called to serve. It was around this time that I was sitting with my parents at their home watching George W. Bush on TV being inaugurated. And I just felt right then and there that it was the time to go. So say what you will about old GW, but he really took care of our men and women in uniform. Handpicked to serve as a member of the United States Air Force Honor Guard, my standards of conduct and devotion to duty must be above reproach, for I represent all members, past and present, of the United States Air Force. This was the first among many, many, many things that I had to memorize when I was at the Air Force Honor Guard, which was my first assignment. I was assigned there with my little brother. We joined up at the same time. It was a neat experience to go through with him, and was also kind of a difficulty as well. It was here, while I was still in training actually, that I met my wife. She was assigned to the same post, but she was in the Navy Ceremonial Guard. One day I was at the chow hall with my brother and some of my co-workers and saw this woman who was the most beautiful woman I'd seen since I joined the military, and I just had to meet her. So that kind of segues into our first Valentine's Day together, which also happened to be our first trip to the White House, or my first trip to the White House anyway. I'd never had a White House job before that, and I was actually supposed to be on leave to spend the time with my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and I got recalled because I was on the list to go to the White House and work that day. It was sort of a pleasant but not so pleasant surprise. After a couple of years there, it wouldn't be my only White House trip, along with some other interesting ones, but it was time to move on. And I had the opportunity to do virtually anything in the Air Force that I wanted to, thanks to the fact that I was a ceremonial guardsman. I chose to become a linguist. I was interested in intelligence, and I liked learning languages. But basically, this threw me right back into college again. At the time, I didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. So I went and I did that for about 2 years, and spent a lot of time afterwards wearing many different hats. I was a supervisor, a trainer, a mission supervisor, a subject matter expert, a program manager, a linguist, a father, a husband. It was just getting to be way too much. I was working something like 60 hours a week and trying to somehow be a present father and a decent husband. It was nearly impossible. Finally, at the end of 2011, I transitioned out of the Air Force and into the Washington Air National Guard. One of the best decisions I think I've ever made. So, like I said earlier, I went through a whole lot of things. I covered a lot of ground. I talked about my interesting parts of my upbringing. It's something that really makes me grateful to still have living parents, in fact. Talked about my adequate but sort of unmotivated school years. And then some interesting parts of my Air Force career and where that's led me and my family today. So I really hope you enjoyed my little story. And if nothing else, I hope you know me a little bit better now. I know having this course online isn't quite the same as doing it in person, but I really wanted to try and make things a little more personal. So thank you all very much for your constructive criticism, and just taking the time to watch.